But the phenomenon, again, will intentionally, strategically pick people who have no background in this. Why? Because they knew if they picked someone like Michael Heiser and said, "Hey, Michael, hey, buddy, I'm a Thor," Michael Heiser would have like, "No, you're not." Why? Because the phenomenon doesn't want to be tested. It wants to manipulate and prop up a mouthpiece so it can propagate the message. It wants communion, it wants worship. And this, again, this gets back to the aspect that we're dealing with the singular species, I should say. They all want the same thing. It goes back to the Pleiadian ambassador. What do I have to do? You have to perform a ritual, you have to pay homage to them, and then after that, we're going to get light phenomena. What are we doing at C5? Even Chris Bledso, when at his events, my friend, he will say that you need to be very thankful for these entities. You need to basically thank them, honor them, pay homage to them. And the more homage you pay, the more powerful a manifestation you'll see in the sky. It's the same thing as the Pleiadian ambassador. It's the same mechanism. So the questions my colleagues and I are asking now is, okay, we know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. But the question is, what does worship do for them? Why do they seek that? Why is it that we are sigilizing rockets and literally sacrificing the leader of the free world? Like, who are you, Mr. President Obama? You're not just a Joe somebody. Why do you have to do that? Because we're performing rituals for them and they're assisting us.
Well, hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm here again with Nathaniel Gillis, and Nathaniel is going to be talking to us tonight about some of his new research and anything else he wants to discuss here tonight. So Nathaniel, welcome back to Interviews from Underground. How are you?
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back with you. I am doing well, and I'm excited to be interviewing with you again, Michael. You're one of my favorite people in the field, and I'm just honored to be back again.
Appreciate that, mate. So Nick, can you tell us about yourself again and what you do and how you came to do it?
Well, my name's Nathaniel Gillis, and I am trying to create a new field called necronetics. At first, when I got into this kind of research, I was doing demonology, reading case studies, trying to understand the phenomenon more. And then from that point, I evolved into ufology and then realized that, yes, some of the same rituals I have found in demonology are actually being performed in ufology. And so at some point, I had to sit with the question, start again from square one, and say, okay, what exactly are we dealing with? What does the data set give us? And sure enough, the latest research I and others have been doing, and we're starting to release these facts more and more. But whatever we're dealing with, they are performing rituals. When we're getting into cases of abductions and experiencers themselves, we're discovering that whatever these beings are, they're carving and writing their own sigils into the skin, and that once we witness them, we're realizing that they're literally the result of a ritual. And that's a very problematic issue for people who are still stuck in the nuts and bolts ufology. But the truth remains. Sure, we might not know what we're dealing with in terms of a species, but whatever they're doing, it does appear to be ritual magic.
Mhm. Are there certain the people who experience this, mate,
Mhm.
are these certain types of people, or can anybody experience this? When you say the sigils, they're writing sigils into people's skin and bodies. Are these certain types of people, or could it be just anybody?
It could be anybody. And I think what's happening now is these sigils are being placed on the body in strategic places, areas of the body that the experiencer themselves would never see, under the eyelids, inside the mouth, in the cheeks. Even then, we have cases where they're invisible to the naked eye. Only until you place them under ultraviolet light do they start to show up on the skin and in the skin. So whatever we're dealing with, it's some of this faction. They are nefarious. And these experiencers are being acted upon, written upon by these beings. But in terms of their victimology, there is no real victimology. They abduct anybody and everybody, according to their purpose and reasoning. But this gets back to one of Dr. Carla Turner's theories, was the fact that the only reason we know of abductions is because people remember them, right? And
Oh,
so that goes into how many. Go ahead.
sorry, under hypnosis, is that what you mean when they remember them?
Yes,
Or
that as well. And then there are some cases where people just remember them consciously and don't need to go through hypnosis. But that's where we're at right now. And the research I can share with everybody, I guess the deepest research that's available now is that yeah, we're going through stages of sigilization within the experiencer. And so early on in ufology, if they had no background in esotericism or the act of sigilization, uh, they would not know what they were looking at. And so initially, you would literally have somebody who was taken, returned, and their body is demonstrating three different aspects of sigilization. So sometimes there would be burns, they would be underneath the skin, which we've had those in many cases. And so you virtually have three different stages of sigilization that these individuals are going through. But if you didn't know that, right, you wouldn't really know what you're looking at. And so, in addition to that, my friend, what we're realizing now is that in ufology, there has been an active narrative, an active, I guess, program to silence this kind of research.
why?
And not, I don't think they want people to realize what's going on here. Like I was doing a Zoom call with a group of researchers. One's from Italy, the other one's from Brazil. And the Brazilian researcher was kind of beside himself because he's like, he goes, everybody in the United States, they're so fascinated by the Virginia case of aliens and the UFO crash. And even the documentarians here in the States are pushing that extraterrestrial narrative. But when I'm talking to people from Brazil, they're saying, no, everyone here locally knows that there was a man in the forest that performed a successful ritual, had an altar, opened up a portal, and whatever these beings are walked in. Now, they weren't just the archetypal ET, which is what we're seeing here in the States, like, okay, this is what they have. No, they were accompanied by other entities. And so what we're seeing now in the States is that there is an active program to decontextualize some of these events from their source. And what is the source? Ritual magic. And so I do believe that's the case, that the evidence says that. And so now what we're asking is what's actually going on here? Are these a species of practitioners? Are they recruiting occultists? Is there some kind of connection between the technology we're being given by the phenomenon and these practitioners that are present? And there's evidence to suggest that as well.
Are these, well, we're going back to what you said there about the sigils. There are three types. You said
Mhm.
burns. What are the other two? The other two signs?
Um, there's so there's some kind of scarification occurring that is supernatural. So if we go back into demonology, they used to call these marks the devil's marks. And according to their scientific method, which is nothing like we have now, they were testing the site, the location of the sigils on the body, and that area was drained of blood and it was numb to the touch. You could prick it with the needle and the experiencer wouldn't feel a thing. It had changed the physiology of the skin it was implanted in. And so what we're looking at again is there are sigils that are underneath the skin, there are burns, and then there is just the regular sigil without the burn on the skin itself. And so I've had cases in even abduction accounts where the experiencer believes, like the interface the phenomenon chose with her was an alien gray. So she tells the family, right? I was abducted by an alien gray. She was never abducted. They watched her as she slept. But whatever took her or whatever acted upon her wrote carved sigils into her skin from head to toe. And so 1 second she's asleep taken by aliens. The next second, she has Theban iconography on her whole body. Now, what we're looking at again are the three stages of sigilization. This is again from Austin Osman Spahr's philosophy, where the body itself will absorb the sigil. It will activate it. And at the very end of the successful fulfillment of the ritual, it will dispose and eject them. They just disappear. And so the leading theory now is that when we're encountering these case studies, that number one, a ritual is being performed upon that individual, and we're somewhere in the middle of it if we catch it soon enough. And it's not just us doing this. If you go into demonology again, Sinister of Amino, as a Franciscan priest, was going into homes within an hour of abductions and an hour of accounts, and the entity was there, and it was leaving sigils under the eyelids on the body. So we're looking at the idea that we're dealing with the same phenomenon, and that many of these cases that want to appear as extraterrestrial are not, because the pathology is not matching the interface. Something is askew. There's a reason for that. And so the evidence we're collecting now, I mean, we're still in the early stages of this, right? We're just now releasing this data, but I think our government knows this. I think the Collins elite knew it. And I think it's just kind of picking at a scab that a lot of researchers don't want to touch. Number one, because a lot of them lack the head knowledge of this, right? They don't want to study demonology because anybody that even suggests demons or something, they freak out, they canceled and all that. And I'm not saying that we're dealing with the moniker of demon, horns and hooves. It appears to be more like a species of practitioners, occultists, high occultists that are using their knowledge against our species. But again, we're still in the early stages of releasing this data. The implications for the human race are very startling
Mhm.
because that would mean that rituals are being performed upon us without our will, without our consent, and in many cases without our awareness. And that's where we sit.
Who are these high occultists? Where are they operating from, do you think?
It appears to be another dimension.
Were they human at one stage?
That's ooh, it's a good question. Necronetics teaches that they were, at least some of them. The Some of the sigils are gender specific.
When you say gender specific, what do you mean? That some of them they just pick on women more than men, or vice
Well,
versa?
yeah, that too. The pathology, even within possession, was usually male and female,
Hmm.
and the Catholic Church has even confirmed that. But back to your question, the profound question of are they human or were they human? There is some evidence that they're formerly human. And there is some kind of symbiotic, if not parasitic, relationship between the phenomenon and these individuals. For instance, I've been looking for vocabulary to articulate my model of the phenomenon, so I had to create new words. And one of them is a proto-intelligence. When these individuals are performing their rituals, they're appealing to some form of consciousness. They're appealing to a power out there in the air. And we have that evidence. In addition to that, we've had interface events where the entity is maintaining its shape, but the image it's choosing, again, it's from a learning matrix. We know that because in times past, like for instance, when you have a child that was taken by your favorite cartoon character, one of my cases, they return later on, 2 or 3 years later, as that same image, that same interface. This individual said, Nathaniel, when it realized that I did not believe in the image, that I didn't believe in the interface, I realized that you can't be what you're wanting me to think you are. This is not who you are. You're not a cartoon. That's when the entity had to learn and lean rather on the learning matrix and had to improvise. And he just stopped. The whole situation was put on pause, and the entity's eyes got real big and they start moving like this. And she said, Nathaniel, I know this sounds crazy. She said, but it was like the entity was measuring my belief in its image. And so there are moments where we can some people call it testing the spirits, but there are moments where we can place the phenomenon in such a position to where it has to update. It has to learn. It has to improvise. And in order to do that, there has to be some form of learning matrix because it's not just instantaneous. No, there are moments that there are lull moments where it's trying to update. And that's when we start to realize that maybe a lot of this is tied to a program, a learning matrix that leans upon us and other consciousness in the air to update its appearance when it's with us. This would explain again, if that is the case, rather, let me back up and say this. If that is the case, then we really cannot trust what they look like, right? This is why, again, when we start getting into these interface events and what I've called mind environments, we're seeing aspects where what happens to the experiencer doesn't fit the bill of the entity they were interfacing with. Ted Rice, my grandfather image, would never do this to me. Behavior. So the data, the behavior is not matching the interface. There's a reason for that. And this gets back to, again, if that is the case, I should say, then it's possible we've never actually seen the face of the phenomenon. We've only seen the bloody footprints in the snow. And I think that's really what this is all about. It's because they do not want us to know the rituals they're performing on us. And yet, again, we have sigils, missing fetuses, right? We have altars being built in their honor and worship. So it's all present. And I think that this does kind of paint a picture that the Collins elite knew. But I think really what happened, my friend, is that they stumbled upon a new species and they could not quantify it. And when the government realized what they found out, under lock and key. Matter of fact, I just read a quote from Nick Redfern. He has tried to publish the sequel to his book, Final Events, 7 times in 7 different publishers said no. So I believe, and some of my colleagues as well do, that we're dealing with a new species of practitioner that's manipulating us.
These guys who are building altars to these new species, what do they get out of it? Do they get it like, is it just a buzz of the, experiencing the supernatural? Do they get power out of it? Do they get wealth? What do they get out of it?
Mostly technology. Mostly technology.
For example, AI, would you say AI or what, like,
Very possible. Yes, very possible. And we're starting to see parts of AI that are not artificial whatsoever. That there's something behind it that's operating that as a facade. Um, but in closed door meetings, I've been told, they'll give you anything if you worship them. Anything. Wealth, technology. And what we're seeing now in the private sector are people who, if they know that the phenomenon is in contact with someone, they'll become good friends with that individual, get ideas from them, and then create a patent the product, and go become millionaires. So whatever we're dealing with, again, it is along the lines of the old gods in antiquity who would want altars built in their image, in their honor, for worship, and then in exchange they would give people wealth and power and technology. It's the same thing. But whatever we're dealing with, again, these entities do seem to be outside of space and time. They're not in the other room, my friend. They're outside of the house entirely. And the only times that we are witnessing their presence is when they incarnate into this dimension. And in addition to that, we're seeing that when they do incarnate, most of the time it's to silence researchers and to again maintain the control mechanism in this reality. So that's why the research that I and others are doing now, it can get dangerous to the point where we have to back up and just, cool off on the interviews because of that. Again, the control matrix of the phenomenon, it doesn't want true disclosure. It does not want disclosure. And it will go to great lengths to stop these conversations from happening. There's a researcher I just mentioned earlier, which I can't mention now, but absolutely. He
mm-hmm,
just done a massive interview, released
mm-hmm.
some of the data, And next thing you know, all hell breaks loose.
Mhm.
So these conversations come at a cost, but the truth has to get out there. We cannot afford to ignore the data. These individuals are being acted upon, written into, and by the time we get in contact with them, the ritual has been successfully fulfilled, and they're left wondering what's going on. Why do I have these symbols on my body? And so the kind of research that has to be done, we have to go a different direction and start looking at this through a different lens.
Nate, what happens in the ritual? What does it consist of? Are they just like, praying, or do they do human sacrifice? What happens there?
Um, this gets okay. So it is my opinion, the data I've seen, that a lot of these, let me say this, the rituals are virtually everywhere. Right now, our federal government they're sigilizing the rockets before they release them into the sky.
What do you mean?
Sigilizing them. Well, this is from Diane Walsh Basuka. She recently said that she's had conversations with people within the aerospace programs here at NASA, the United States, that before, this is back in Barack Obama's presidencies, where before they would launch a rocket out into space, they would write sigils on it as symbols. We would see them as symbols, but they're sigils. In addition to performing a ritual there underneath the rocket itself, to the extent, my friend, that they would tell Barack Obama, the leader of the free world, we want you to stand in this circle and look in that direction when we launch this. And when she asked them what the purpose of this is, what are you doing this for? Why? And they said, because we want to honor our sponsors. So again, what we're looking at now is we thought we were dealing with extraterrestrials. Now we have to go back into grimoires. Now we have to go back into demonology and say, okay, even if it is not the classic horns and hooves, the model of practitioner stands sure. Whatever we're dealing with, even if they're humans here, they're working with the presence, they're working with something that honors rituals. Now, getting back to your question about what kind of rituals they're performing, I'll give you another case in point. Early on in my research, I was taught that the hybridism that we found in demonology and ufology was just strictly extraterrestrial, right? They're splicing DNA and everything. And then I knew that there was something wrong with that model because it didn't matter who you asked. What happened with these hybrid mothers is, okay, I fell into a deep sleep, right? Or I was in a dream and a man came to me and it was my ex-husband, my ex-boyfriend, that kind of thing. And over and over again, I started realizing that it's almost like this is a recipe for something, right? These attributes and characteristics are present most of the time. It's just a dream until the individual wakes up and they're pregnant. And then the phenomenon takes the fetus. And so that's when I started looking at different rituals that would facilitate these characteristics. Like, what am I really observing here? And that's when I came to the ultimate black mass, which is a ritual performed by a high occultist, a mage, where at the end of his life, he will induce a woman into a dreamlike state. Check. Demonology called that the dream demon. Why? Because the dream was to explain, it was to describe the trance, the stupor the entity had placed them in. And so some of these rituals are being performed by feeding the individual some kind of medication to put them asleep. But anyways, yeah, so you have these different characteristics. You put them into a dreamlike state. You inseminate them. You appear to them as something that they would give consent to. Later on, they would think that it was just a bad nightmare, not realizing that you had placed your own sigils on the body to help you transfer consciousness to that fetus. At the end of it, you transfer one body into that fetus, you have a new avatar. Well, that's what we've been looking at. That's why Sinistro Avamino found sigils on the skin of the hybrid mothers. And again, when we're looking through the lens of demonology, uh, they acted like, well, the question's been answered, right? We know for sure it's a demon. No, what led them to believe it was a demon was because of the sigils. But the problem with that model, again, is that the seed, the secretions left on the body of the experiencer, prove the corporeality of the entity. So that was a physical being. And so what we're looking at again is the adjustment of the model. And that is that we may not be looking at spirits or aliens, right? We may be looking at something that's a little closer to home. And from my perspective, a formerly human being or species of them that are using ritual magic to manipulate reality.
Are they working under a singular intelligence, or
Mhm.
what is their operating system behind the high occultists? Like, who are they under?
Um, I don't know. I know that in demonology we had not archetypes, but hierarchy. That's what dominated demonology was the idea that there's one above all and there's others. Um, I'm still out on that, my friend. I do believe that they are pulling from some form of consciousness. There's a rule system out there that they're operating under, right? That we are in complete ignorance of. Now, of course, people would say Nathaniel Gillis, and they have. Well, Nathaniel, you know that's the devil. And it's like, okay, we can go there for a second. But we also knew there were demons until the model started to say otherwise. So we have to evolve according to the data. We have to abandon the dogma to embrace the data. But to answer your question, yes, this it's I'm leaning more towards something or someone that recruited these practitioners in life.
Like,
And then
do you mean like a Parsons kind of, or Crowley type of thing,
yes,
or
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what leads me to believe that um are that some of the rituals we're seeing transcend the occultism on this planet. We have no way to quantify it, right? I mean, if you're talking about a species that can pull the soul out of the body, and then once that soul is replaced, what's put back into the body, now from underneath the skin to the surface, we see sigils. We have nothing for that, Michael. I mean,
yeah.
that would literally be something, again, that's outside of space-time. Again, that
Mhm.
the rituals are being performed in that dimension. And then once these people are placed back into this dimension, we're seeing the end result of the ritual. And so that's really what I think we're dealing with.
Yeah, but for something like that, for something as powerful and extraordinary, for something like that to occur, these high
Mhm.
occultists, they would have to be drawing from some ultimate power. Now, I don't want to say the
Right.
word God, but I would say the word
Yeah,
a God, so some authority that is higher than them. To have that,
100%.
to be able to do that sort of thing to people and their souls. So I'm just
Hmm.
curious, without saying the word devil, I know that word gets
Hmm.
thrown around a lot. There must be something guiding them or giving them that kind of authority over people. It does.
Mentoring. Yeah, these are initiates. There's no doubt about it. And I do believe our government knows this. And I believe that some of the whistleblowers that they're going to be coming out soon, but that we haven't seen them. Like it's like Diana Walsh Basuka said. She's like, the whistleblowers we're seeing at these hearings, they're not the real whistleblowers. She said the real whistleblowers are the people who are still stuck in the demon versus angel model of the phenomenon. And I've had conversations with some of these space engineers, CEOs, where they're like, Nathaniel, yeah, whatever we're dealing with, forget just technology, right? Forget technology. It's almost like the phenomenon is so powerful that in order to mislead people on its origin, it has to act like it's technology, not spiritual, not something outside of that bubble. It's technology. It's not really. There's something else here that has the ability to manipulate reality. And I need to make this point clear: not just manipulate our perception of reality, right? Once we get in contact with it, and we really start to see how powerful it is, especially regarding how powerful it is over our technology. It is in complete and utter control over our technology. And so I think that's what we're dealing with. But getting back to the idea that these entities or whatever these things are, Really, I hate to be grammatically incorrect, but we really don't know. But you're right. Whatever they're doing, they have been mentored and initiated by someone else, something else. And I think that there are those that are still alive today that because of their initiation, the phenomenon is giving them access to technology, access to it. And so this gets back to Richard Banderick's research, where he's an aerospace CEO right now, but he said that 40 years ago, he had contracted with the United States government to go out and actually collect some of this meta material. And when he did, he said that he would hold it in his hand, and he said, if it did not agree with you, if it wasn't designed for you, it would devolve and dissolve into just some kind of dust. But he made a very interesting point. He said that when you would look at the ground, if it was on the ground, it would look like the environment it was in. It would blend in. So you wouldn't know if you were really looking at it until they knew, okay, yeah, this is where we're supposed to be looking. This is what it is. So my point is, again, that this gets back into Matthew Brown's recent interview, not recent, but interview with um, George Knapp and Jimmy Corbell, where he said that we live in a construct. There are those who have broken free from it. I think that we're talking about these entities and these practitioners. Some of them broke out of the matrix and they're now seeking to influence it from the outside in.
So they've only come, do you think they've only come in the last few years? When I know there was a thought with Crawley in
Yeah.
1948, or have these things been around since Egyptian times or forever?
I At least the formerly practitioners, yeah. I do believe that they've been around for a long, long, long time. I mean, we're to the point now in the research where we're not even asking the questions we once were. I mean, at first blush, speaking from my own experience, I was like, well, this has got to be horns and hooves to a T. It's got to be this, got to be that. And there came a point in my research where I had to throw everything away and start from square one. What do we really know about the phenomenon? Right? What do we really know? We know that even the abductions, even when we remember them, even like that in itself, the memory itself could have been controlled by the phenomenon. Right. Okay. And even when they do interface with us, 99% of the time, it's not who they really are. Even in Barry and Steve's research, Barry Fitzgerald and Steve Mera, they started testing the EVPs they were collecting. These were not human beings. It was something that wanted to sound like a human being. And even the guides in that archetype, we know they're not really guides because Ted Rice was abducted as a child. And then only in his adulthood did he start having PTSD symptoms. And he goes to his guides to get context to his negative encounter with aliens. And those guides never answered him back. Why? Because these are archetypes the phenomenon weaponizes against our species. He wasn't dealing with different intelligences, he's dealing with one. They were working together. And so this is really what we're looking at is like, okay, what about the phenomenon do we really know? We only know what we can know because we know what it wants. And we try to kind of build a bridge between what it wants and what they are. Here's what we know for sure. Okay. Albert Bender built an altar to these entities. Okay. When he got to a point in his research and he realized these were not extraterrestrials at all, they pulled him out of his own body and warned him. He was hovering in bed over his body, and they warned him, stop seeking the answers to the universe. Stop your research. He went to, again, he went to a cinema to watch a movie. He's the only one in his row. He looks to the left of him, and there's a man that materializes right next to him. He started realizing there's something wrong here, and yet he built an altar to them. You know, I've had conversations with other ufologists who were in Albert Bender's same vein of research, right? Approaching the phenomenon as if they're all extraterrestrial. We're going to approach it scientifically for, technological advancement. Um, Only for them to finally realize, like, once they got a seat at the table, Michael, with the people that are in charge of ufology in America and the world virtually, they show up at dinner at this individual's house. First thing this individual does is show this person their altar to these beings. Doesn't fit the method here. That's when they realized this is all a smokescreen. These people, Michael, are going to conferences, okay, telling the world these beings are extraterrestrial, knowing that, knowing that when they get home, they're going to go light candles and perform a ritual to them. So that's
You
what I mean when we're being lied to when I say that. Mhm.
so you don't distinguish between ufology and demonology. They're
No,
both the
not at
same
all.
thing.
Yes, now both of them can be wrong, right? Again, there are aspects of both that are true, most more so in demonology. But again, I think that demonologists looked at how capable the phenomenon is and how powerful these entities are, and they said, okay, there's ritual involved, then it has to be horns and hooves. And I'm to the point now where I'm like, well, it could be something else. You know what I mean? It could be something else. And that would be more along the lines of the practitioner. But with respect again to this altar making, um, the ufologists know very well. The people that are in the know, they know very well what we're dealing with here. And they know how to get the phenomenon's attention. They do it through ritual. They do it through altar making, altar building, and paying homage to whatever species this is. Now, what's fascinating is even when you get into the idea of building an altar, what goes into it, in the idea of goading people into believing into extraterrestrial existence, and then leading them by the hand into initiatory practices, and then altar building, and then incantations. Another one was I'm in contact with a guy in Brazil, and a wealthy family had hired a Pleiadian ambassador to go to Brazil, give a lecture. And sure enough, under the auspices of extraterrestrial contact, people buy a ticket, buy a t-shirt. I want to go to the conference and hear what they're all about. At the conclusion of the lecture, Michael, this lady builds an altar to them. What? She pulls out an idol, places it at the head of the altar, looks at everybody in the lecture and says, okay, here's the incantation we're going to utter in their presence. And at the successful fulfillment of the incantation at the altar, they will manifest as light phenomena out in the sky. Wait a minute, I thought we're just UFO. No, it's not just ufology. Those would be called UFOs in times past, but now the phenomenon's evolving. Now it's willing to let us see behind the mask. What are we really dealing with? Are the lights the result of successful rituals? And why is it again that in times past that we would have seen that as ufology? People would have allowed us to believe it was just ufology. Not they did not want us to know what's going on behind the curtain is, oh, by the way, here's an incantation, here's an altar, and here's how we're conjuring the phenomenon. So we're getting a little bit of disclosure right now.
Yeah, I'm just looking here. I forget the guy's name. Is it Bigelow, the guy who wrote the book, something about the gods, UFO gods? Whenever he wants to summon God, what's the guy's name?
UFO of God, Bledso.
What's his name?
Bledso, Chris Bledso.
Yeah. Well, what do you make of him? What do you make? He can basically go out any night and just
Yeah.
summon the lights in the sky. What's going on there, mate?
Um, I think he's a good man. I'm not going to cast any shade on him or his family. The problem is that I don't trust the phenomenon at all. At all. I think that
So you
I
think
I
he's
have
being you think he's being lied to, manipulated?
100%, 100%. If not by the phenomenon, then by the powers within our federal government. When you have Tim Taylor pulling him and his children aside in their home and placing a piece of metal in Chris's hands and goes, "Oh, by the way, that is 200 billion light years away from you," right? That metal is from 200 billion, I think it was, light years away. Okay, sure. The real problem, if I can just be transparent with you, is that there are people involved with Chris Bledsoe's story that initially wanted to buy it from him to produce something with it. I didn't know that. I read it, I won't mention her name, but yeah, in the book, in the UFO of God book, Chris Bledsoe's book, he mentions that this individual was not really interested in his account in terms of wanting to understand it. Their production company wanted to purchase his case from him so they can go make money off of it. So whatever we're dealing with, again, ufology itself, it's not what we're seeing. There's something more malevolent at play here. But getting back to Mr. Bledsoe's account, number one, I do not believe that abduction at Cape Fear is his first encounter with the phenomenon at all. At all. He's had missing time since he was a child. And when Hathor allegedly manifested to him, she said, "You remember the deal you made. Remember your commitment. Remember what you promised us." Well, what are you talking about? When did that happen? And so again, even the encounter itself has characteristics of a ritual. The ball of light appears, right? He is induced into a trance-like state. What is this? Who are you? What am I? What's going on here? And then a bull comes and jumps right over top of him. These are Eastern Mediterranean rituals of initiation through and through. And again, that's what I believe is happening. And I don't want to, again, I want to kind of preface that with, I do believe they're a good family. I do believe he's a good man. But we've seen this in times past where good men are manipulated by really evil beings who do not have rather their best interests in mind. But whatever we're dealing with, there is some form of legality here where the ritual has to be performed. If they were that powerful, right, they could just do whatever they want to do. But that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing again is that in order for A, B, and C to happen, you have to fulfill something on your end. And then it creates a portal of manifestation and incarnation to where the phenomenon now downloads its presence into this dimension. So, again, to kind of summarize, what we're dealing with from my perspective is a species of practitioners. They are a species. And we only called them alien because we didn't have a way to quantify them. So in the same frame, I believe again, that's why demonologists believe they're demons, because they saw aspects of ritual magic, even in hybridism, right? There's sigils and secretions. That's not a demon. That's a corporeal entity who has a body. And so when you look at it through that lens, some questions are answered, my friend, but it leads us into a darker path that can become very perilous at times.
Mhm. The government guy that was with that guy, Chris, he was a top
Hmm.
government guy. I forget his name. Did you say his name is Taylor?
Hmm.
The guy,
Tim
he's
Taylor.
yeah, he stays a lot in the background, right? You don't really hear much from him. He tends, but he's very
Yeah.
involved with ufology.
Hmm.
What do you make of
Hmm.
him? Do you think he knows exactly what's going on, or
I think he knows more, and I just believe that when you have somebody like Chris Bledsoe who is in contact with the phenomenon, you're going to have members of our federal government as well as members of the Vatican hot on their trail. One wants to recontextualize the point of contact. Oh, well, it's an angel. It's an angel. It's got to be an angel. It's an angel. And then you have the government, like Tim Taylor, saying, okay, like, what are you getting from them? Like, what are they giving you? Are they giving you any kind of technology? Um, I listened to an interview with someone who's very close to Chris say that, yeah, that Chris gave this individual an idea for a patent, and the individual ran off with it and made $200 million or something off of it. But there's a problem again when the Vatican gets involved. And I've had friends in the field that have suffered this same demise where they want complete control over you. They want to do body images. They want to do brain scans. They were going to treat you like a specimen, and you're going to virtually sign your rights away as a person. So everybody wants at you. At the same time, the phenomenon will not just act like it's angelic, right? It will prop you up as a prophet. And now you've seen the replication of religion all over again, which I believe is what it's really after. It's creating new religions. But to that point, again, these do seem to be good people. But what the phenomenon does, Michael, is it will pick somebody out that has no real understanding of any of this, right? They're not researchers and they have no real background in this. And so their experience is their experience. So if I, like, Diana Paul's even went to Christ and said, okay, you do realize that other people have came out with apocalyptic prophecies and they've never come true. Why is she saying that? Because she's telling the God's honest truth. But the phenomenon, again, will intentionally, strategically pick people who have no background in this. Why? Because they knew if they picked someone like Michael Heiser and said, hey, Michael, hey, buddy, I'm Hathor. Michael Heiser would have, like, no, you're not. Why? Because the phenomenon doesn't want to be tested. It wants to manipulate and prop up a mouthpiece so it can propagate the message. It wants communion, it wants worship. And this, again, this gets back to the aspect that we're dealing with the singular species, I should say. They all want the same thing. It goes back to the Pleiadian ambassador. What do I have to do? You have to perform a ritual, you have to pay homage to them, and then after that, we're going to get light phenomena. What are we doing at C5? Even Chris Bledso, when at his events, my friend, he will say that you need to be very thankful for these entities. You need to basically thank them, honor them, pay homage to them. And the more homage you pay, the more powerful a manifestation you'll see in the sky. It's the same thing as the Pleiadian ambassador. It's the same mechanism. So the questions my colleagues and I are asking now is, okay, we know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. But the question is, what does worship do for them? Why do they seek that? Why is it that we are sigilizing rockets and literally sacrificing the leader of the free world? Like, who are you, Mr. President Obama? You're not just a Joe somebody. Why do you have to do that? Because we're performing rituals for them and they're assisting us.
So if they're so obsessed with us
Yeah.
worshiping them, what do you think that says about our ability to worship? What do you think that says
Oh,
about our worship? I
mm,
don't know. I don't even know the word to what our capacity to worship. What does that say
mm.
about it?
I don't know. I
It
really
must it
don't.
mu- it, mu- it must be very powerful. It must be a very powerful aspect of our
Mhm.
humanity, of our humanness, I guess.
Correct.
If they're after that one thing.
Yes, homage. You build me an altar, and I'll give you whatever you want. And a lot of this does bleed into jinn sorcery. I've had not had, but I've read of cases where practitioners, just to test these beings out, would say, if I did A, B, and C for you, and I told you I want A, B, and C in return, what's the exchange rate? Right? And if you're not going to accept this offering, I'm going to go take it to another step, go even bigger, badder. Will you respond then? And they have. I've had friends that one is a doctor of divinity, and a lot of these beings are actually mentoring people in the music industry, where they'll give them a song. They'll give them a song, or they have to perform a ritual for a song. And I'm talking about people that would blow your mind. And it's like, okay, I have to have a high standard for evidence, right, to convince me. Because I've heard a lot in my years. I'm like, let's test that. No, like, this individual worked with an individual, a rapper who, yeah, I don't know what these are, but I had to perform a ritual for them. And then, by the way, what are these symbols on my back? The entity left these on me after a ritual. So
You talking
it,
about
it,
like
it
Lady Gaga types,
sigils.
or And
Yes, all of them, virtually all of them, in my opinion. Yeah, and what we're looking at again is this kind of symbiotic relationship between our species and whatever these beings are. And I do believe again that a lot of demonology is accurate in its analysis, but when you start having secretions left by the entity, that's corporeality. That's corporeality. And so they have bodies, which that kind of muddies up the Nephilim hypothesis. These are supposed to be spirits that are disembodied. Well, we got a problem.
Nate, is the Collins Elite, are they still active? Are they still functioning in some
um,
other sort of way or some other organization or body?
I believe they are. I just believe again that they're not going to be calling themselves the Collins Elite. I know that they're still doing this kind of research. Um, and again, dealing with the Collins Elite, we're 52 years removed from their conclusions. Like even what Nick Redfern wrote about was 52 years old. Like it started, 52 years ago, but their conclusions were left like, what are we dealing with? Uh, we better hope it's demonic. We better hope so. Because if it's not, if it is, if the implications are true, if the evidence that we're seeing now is accurate, then it would be a species that is in control of reality or parts of it or have been given control over it by someone else. And whatever they are, there is this kind of, again, control mechanism where, like, I'll tell you this real quick. Even like getting back to Albert Bender and the phenomenon's willingness, desire to keep a version of the phenomenon away from us, right? The accurate model, the control mechanism matrix, as Vallée suggests. There was a group of scientists in the 1970s who were, again, stumbling in the dark, thinking this is all extraterrestrial. And so they were, they had patents, they were scientific savants in their fields. And one by one, the night before, and this will kind of give you context to our conversation before we got on here, right? The night before they were about to release their conclusions on the phenomenon, how it evolved from extraterrestrial to something more interdimensional, more ultra terrestrial, they were found deceased. The families were beside themselves and said, there's no way he would have done this to himself. There's something really malevolent here, right? One by one. The last one was Professor Rene Hardy, Professor Rene Hardy, who, again, he was going to go out and publish for peer review his thesis. And it was, yeah, we're not dealing with extraterrestrials. There's something here. There's something on the earth that appears to be in control of it and in control of our species. They found him deceased. They go to his funeral. In the silence, doors open, doors shut. In walks a group of men, about 5 or 6 of them, very tall, very pale, thin, in suits. The family remembers talking to them. Thank you for coming. Everybody, people that, it's crazy. They witnessed these individuals, Michael. They spoke to them. Afterwards, they get together as a family like they do after funerals. One gentleman says, by the way, who were those guys that walked in right before the funeral started? I have no idea. So they start asking questions about them. They go to the footage, camera footage, and video, and these people never showed up. They weren't caught on camera.
So
So
when they were there, people
they were there.
more than one person saw them,
Yes,
but they
yes,
didn't show up on camera,
absolutely. Shook hands with them. Corporeality, tangible, 3D,
and yet they didn't
conversing
show
with them.
and yet they didn't show up on camera.
Yes. Or
Mhm.
did they even exist? Because that's really where we are right now.
What do you think of OBEs, out of body experiences? What do you think of that phenomenon?
I believe it's real. I do not believe it's fallacy, imagination. Um, I just don't trust the entities. A lot of these OBEs and even NDEs are triggered by the phenomenon. I have a case behind me in the book Beyond UFOs, and this kind of concerns me about Bledso. If I could just be very transparent with you, because in this particular case, an individual was involved in a catastrophic vehicle accident. And in his words, I was pulled out of my body by an intelligent electricity. And he is interfacing with entities. First thing they said is, look, you're going to die if we do not help you, but we can save you. We can. But you've got to agree to some things before we do. Not wanting to die, of course. He agrees. They said, okay, thank you. Now, there will come a time when we're going to need to use you. We want you to say what we want you to say and do what we want you to do. And when that time comes, remember, again, here's your life in my hand. Remember what we've done for you. So the agreement was based upon a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience. And the question was, and is, was that induced by the phenomenon? So do I believe they're real? Yes, I wouldn't recommend it, doing that, because, we don't know what we're dealing with on the other side. In some cases, even like out-of-body experiences have actually been induced through ayahuasca and potions in witchcraft. And some people are getting out of their body and showing up in areas they're not supposed to be at. And the first question they're being asked is, who are you and what are you doing here? So can it happen? Absolutely. But do I recommend doing it? I don't.
Mhm. Do you know Peter Thiel?
Hmm.
He's going to do a lecture series in a week or two, I think it is,
Antichrist.
about the Antichrist. Yeah, a four. I think it's a four series, or there's four lectures he's going to be giving in this on this topic of the Antichrist.
Hmm.
I was looking it up. I'm quite interested to listen to it because I think he might have
Yeah.
some valuable insights into it. But I asked ChatGPT to give me a summary of what it thinks he'll cover, and it gave me this. So the Antichrist, a four-part lecture series, Peter Thiel. So Thiel's lecture series will explore the idea of the Antichrist as both a biblical and cultural concept, tracing how it has been understood through history, literature, theology, and political thought. Drawing on writers like René Girard, Francis Bacon, Jonathan Swift, and Carl Schmitt, he'll connect the Antichrist to themes of power, deception, and imitation. How
Hmm.
societies fall for false messiahs or destructive ideologies disguised as progress. Expect him to tie these ideas to modern science and technology, asking whether today's innovations, utopian promises, or political movements might carry an antichrist dimension when they attempt to replace faith with human mastery. I see a lot of value in that. I'm actually looking forward to seeing what his take on the whole thing is.
Hmm.
I think it will be insightful. So, what do you think?
Yeah. I'm kind of in your camp, brother. I'm anxious to see what he has to say. Because him and JD Vance are very close, have been very close. And Palantir, I think it's Peter Thiel's company, AI software. Um, I'm just anxious because what Matthew Brown said in his interview with George Knapp and Jimmy Corbell was that the United States is in possession of an artificial intelligence that has and will and can accurately predict the future. Accurately predict the future. And so when you have that in the same ballpark, in the same time frame as Peter Thiel coming out and talking about the Antichrist, yeah, I'm going to punch my ticket. I'm going to watch. And
Yeah,
I'm going
yeah.
to see if he's trying to implicate any kind of political movement
Mhm.
or any religion. That's what I'm really interested in hearing. But yeah, whoever these guys are, again, you're talking about Matthew Brown, the guys that are in the know, even the whistleblowers that Dr. Pasuka mentioned, right? They're still in the ballpark. They're still in the model of angels and demons. There is something more than technology that has pushed them into that arena.
Mhm.
It's not just, again, it's not just ritual. Whatever they know, if disclosure occurred, It would be an ontological shock in every way, not just religion. Like, let's go there for a second if we can. When people say, okay, it's just this or that, what would destroy all of religion if we knew about it, right? Because that's the reason, right? They said, okay, yeah, it would be panic in the streets if it really came out. In my mind, there would only be one thing that would destroy every model of phenomenon, and that would be that there are others that are in control of this planet that know our future. They're sentient, precognitive, and that we would start to question our own free will. Like, Steve Mera is a good friend of mine, and a lot of his conclusions in his research have just blown me away, and it's led me to question a lot. Like he was talking to me one night about uh, doing experiments with the phenomenon to where, like, testing its knowledge base. Him and Barry were getting communication from the phenomenon that would say, okay, at a certain date, at a certain time, you're going to be doing A, B, and C.
How are they getting this communication?
Um, I don't know. I think it was through EVP, I believe. But it was, and I have to ask Steve about that. But it was to the point where the phenomenon had successfully predicted the future up to, I think, 12 to 15 months. And so it's like your Truman Show, like you're in Truman Show, the movie, and where Truman really he's thinking, okay, this is all a stage. I'm being manipulated. So he goes up to the stop sign and he goes, okay, I'm going to turn right instead of turning left. And when he turned right again, the stage managers are trying to control him. No, 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 you got to turn left. Why? Because you can't turn right. You got to turn left. And so Steve was like, well, you've done this 3 times already. I'm gonna ask you again what I'm gonna be doing. You're gonna tell me, and I'm gonna do my best not to do it. Right. And so he started going against his own grain. Like, okay, if I would have done this tomorrow, I'm gonna do the opposite. He did the opposite of what he would usually do, and then still showed up the same destination at the same time.
Hmm.
So it's precognitive. And again, a lot of these characteristics do check the box of demonic, but I think that still doesn't fit the bill. Whatever we're dealing with is exact. I think the Collins elite realize this. Our government does too. They know that it's one thing to say that they can walk into our rooms, but it's another thing to say they have access to the soul and that they know the future. It would literally come down to are we characters in someone else's story, right? Would it just be better for me to go stock shelves and completely ignore this? Because the evidence suggests it's more like the Truman Show. It's more like Dark City, where there is something with us that is creating or even replicating reality in our presence. We think it's something, it's blending in. We're not realizing, yeah, a lot of these are constructs in that whatever the species is, we're being acted upon.
Is this what you mean by consent, manufacturing consent and
Mhm.
perception management?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yes. Now, there's a difference again between what we're seeing with our eyes and what the phenomenon actually is. Even Dr. Gary Nolan had a case from France recently. It was a child, a boy who was in his car with his family, looks through the sunroof, and he sees a craft hovering above the car. He describes it in the best detail he could. When they took a photograph of it, it was completely different than what that child saw with his eyes. This gets back into hauntology. Lloyd Auerbach has had cases, and other parapsychologists for that matter, where they witness an apparition. They witness it with their eyes, an apparition moving through the home. They go back to the camera. There was no apparition called, it was just a ball of light. So there's a difference between what we're witnessing visually in what the phenomenon actually is. And what I'm running into now in the field are people that are willing to say, yeah, Even though it appeared to be an alien, we don't believe it is. But then I say, okay, what if it appeared to you as horns and hooves? Well, it's got to be that. No, it doesn't. That could also be just another visual archetype of the phenomenon. And that's why I'm telling at least the people that I'm mentoring now to, if you're going to sit with the question, take all of the archetypes, put them to the side. What is the phenomenon doing? What is it doing? What is it leaving? What are the trace elements the phenomenon's leaving behind? Because we know for a fact that the phenomenon likes to use theater and performances to get us looking at one thing. Meanwhile, the true proto intelligence, the real phenomena, is there doing something completely different. And this is what I was telling you about before, Michael, where right the interface does not match the behavior because the behavior is the phenomenon, not the archetypes it interfaces as. So that's really where we are. But my whole point here, though, is if you look at the paranormal mechanism throughout all of the phenomena, it really is the same. It really is the same. And anyways, you know me, I can go on.
I'm going to leave it with this last question, Nate.
Mhm.
What is the best recent research that you've come across? What has impressed you the most in the form of a book or a lecture or somebody that
Mm,
just came on the scene? What is the most recent
yeah.
thing that has sparked your interest?
Well, I don't trust a lot of new stuff because it's not really new. um, the latest insight comes from a conversation Steve Mayer and I had, where in his research, I think it was him and Barry were having cases where the phenomenon was materializing objects in homes. It would actually take things from homes and replace them with something else. Looks the same, but it's not the same. And so the question was asked, why is the phenomenon willing to materialize objects in someone's home? Like, what's the whole point of this? Right? And how many times has this happened in times past? And we never knew about it. We just went along living and thinking, okay, that's my coffee mug. It's not. The phenomenon gave that to you. It looks like the coffee mug, but it's not. So it kind of gets scarier as I get into this, really. But so what they did is they said, okay, this is strange. So what they did is they took the apport and they took it from the home, placed it into a storage space, and they waited. Again, this gets back to the learning matrix. The phenomenon ceased in the home. And so the next day they get a phone call. The family is ecstatic. Thank you so much. You guys are the best. We're not seeing shadow figures anymore. The phenomenon, or whatever this is left. Steve and Barry go, no, it hasn't. The learning matrix, it's triangulating. It's looking for an access point. And so what they did to test it again, they took the objects, the phenomena materialized, the apports, and they repositioned them in the home and waited. Sure enough, what once was just triangulating now has a portal. It connects to that materialized object, anchors itself to it, and now you have paranormal manifestation. All hell breaks loose. Why? Again, it's connecting. And so what I started doing rather is looking through case studies in demonology because I'm thinking I've heard of this before. God, I've heard of it. Where in demonology has the phenomenon created apports? Literally just materialized objects out of thin air. And dealing with the exorcism of the home, if you will, how do I get the phenomenon to leave? Right? Well, what it started doing is it'll apport something else so that it can anchor its presence to that instead, right? It's triangulating. You're wanting to get it out of the house. It doesn't want to leave the area. So it's going to materialize something it can anchor itself to. That is an act of self-replication. Okay, if you don't want me here, I'm going to go here. I want to anchor myself to it. So that's the self-replication method. I'm going to materialize something, anchor my presence to it. You're not going to kick me out. We've seen that in exorcisms.
Mhm.
Didn't know it, right? Had no idea. But in some of the worst exorcisms, When the exorcist is trying to kick the phenomenon out of the person, they will materialize objects out of their own mouths, spit them out. What is it doing? It doesn't want to leave. It's anchoring its presence in that room. We had no idea. We wouldn't have known if not for parapsychology. And so what we're looking at now is the possibility that these are the same entities. And they're employing the same mechanisms in that the reason, again, the same reason the phenomenon of ported objects in the home was to stay there, to anchor itself to them. We believe, at least I do, that that's what they're doing in demonology as well. I'm not leaving. This is not just a miracle. I'm materializing something and I'm going to anchor myself to it because I do not want to leave.
Do you have iron in your house?
Yes, a good friend of mine and a supporter of my research made me an iron ring. So hand hammered it even. So yeah, I do, thankfully. But yeah,
Would you say having an iron cross in the house is a good idea, or any sort of iron? Does it have to be a
yes.
cross, or
There are cases for it and against it. But an iron cross, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
why do you think iron is a good idea to have in the house? Why does the phenomena react so negatively to iron?
hmm I don't know. I mean, I know we have ideas about why that happens, but there's nothing that's concrete there.
Mhm,
And for whatever reason, that only works, iron only works above ground. When you get into caverns and under the earth, it doesn't work at all. So again, we're looking at dimensions of authority. And what, anyways, it's fascinating stuff.
mhm, mhm. Well, Nate, okay, thank you so much. Where can people find you and where can people see your stuff? Where can they look up your stuff?
So if you're interested in my research more, you can go into what's called parasymposia.com. It's a platform I'm creating for people who want to sign up and really follow what I'm doing. But it's at parasymposia.com, and that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. Guys, I'm going to have the links at the bottom, so check the links in the description. Thank you very much, Nate. Thank you so much.